Every day we perceive and process a ton of information, but some things you can't observe or see at the moment. So what our brain does is grab them from our memory and visualize them as images in our head. This is needed to determine and conceptualize what our primal needs are at any given moment. If I were to ask you to imagine an apple, what would you see? Most people see a vivid image of an apple in their heads. However, how would you feel if I told you that some people indeed don't have those mental images? It's called aphantasia, which translates to without imagination from Greek. People who can imagine well are called hyperaphants. So, for the mentioned example with an apple, it would be as you feel the taste of an apple, you have sensations of eating an apple, and you can describe it with words, but you can't form any mental image of an apple. This illness hasn't been studied well because the only research until recently was done in 1880s by Francis Galton, and more researches are starting to come out in 2015 and 2020. Researchers have long debated whether aphantasia extends to other internal behaviors such as memory and visual stuff. Because aphants have almost no imagery, however, their performance on tests of memory and visual perception is normal. Before I continue, it is important to take into account that this illness is not too serious, because most people actually learn this when they're adults, and it's quite funny. For instance, some of them thought that counting sheep was actually a metaphor, and we couldn't imagine sheep while we were trying to fall asleep. Aphants say that there is an impact on long-term memory as we have associative memory. This means that we tie events or pieces of information to another event or object. It can be a flashback as well. For instance, walking past a restaurant and remembering a friend you had first met there. But as for aphants, there are no flashbacks, so remembering stuff might be harder for them. The inability to mentally time travel is called SDAM, severely deficient autobiographical memory. However, it's not always bad because there are no disturbing flashbacks and forgetting the bad stuff is quite easier. It is said that someone with aphantasia might remember the day they were married, the list of people who attended, and even what the weather was that day, but they will be unable to form any mental image. Have a look at this quote. Here, the author's comparing having aphantasia to playing a video game, where you're in a third person. It's something like this, where, I find it quite amusing because that does actually sound true. And the way to diagnose aphantasia, other than by yourself, is through fMRI brain scanning. This is that big chunky machine that you slide in and get your brain scanned. How this works is that visualizing and seeing images are done by the same process in our brain, but scans of aphants show that parts of brain active are different. So that's why hyperaphants have a stronger connection between the parts of brain related to vision and decision making. While conducting information for this talk, I found an enormous amount of artists in Wikipedia's list of famous people with aphantasia. Even Twitter posts from people who just learned that they have aphantasia, and many comments beneath are from other aphants. It might look as if you can't form a mental image in your head, it's probably bad for being an artist. But if you think about it more, it might make some sense, as if you can't form a mental image, why not put it on a piece of paper before you and draw it? And then I've stumbled upon Ed Catmull. He did a research at Pixar, and he's ex-Pixar chief, by the way. He did a survey conveying the staff or his team on how well they could actually imagine. He asked 540 members, and the result, he found out that technical artists, those who go hand to hand with IT and technology, were very close to artists and animators. However, both of them were way worse in imagining stuff than production managers who had no connection to art whatsoever. So I started digging up information and found a community on Reddit, which is a social network I quite enjoy because you can talk directly to each other in small communities of interest. And I started by asking a question to Athens on my first idea of them being somehow related with us. And this got me a few new theories and a few responses, but, well, many of them called it something like confirmation bias. So I went ahead and, as I really didn't find much information on the internet, I asked them what is their profession. So, boom. This got me way more responses than I initially estimated, and, well, the results were quite interesting because you can see that there are a lot of art-related and science-related professions in here, and just a few of them being not related to those science and art industries. It is important to take into account that no research up to date has empirically verified whether aphantasia does actually extend to other internal behaviors and memory. So what that means that none of this is scientifically proven yet. So we've established that brain builds mental images. But what if you can't see? What if you're blind? Then many blind people do report having some mental imagination, but it's just black and white. Well, because the person doesn't know anything about colors, and it does know, however, about borders and the general shapes of objects. So, as I understand it, it looks quite like this, where you can see the general shape and borders of an object. Yes. Moreover, dreaming, on the other hand, is a way to store important and troubling information that occurs throughout the day. And then there is this question: does aphantasia also spill out to dreams? And it's actually not that simple, because one source says that it does not, because parts of brain that are working in dreaming and imagining stuff are different, but some Athens do actually have dreams as sensations and feelings. In conclusion, yeah, we got that our brain messes things up. There are countless brain illnesses, one where you can't differentiate between human faces, one where you can see numbers in different colors, and the last one is called aphantasia. It occurs when there appears a breach between parts of brain. For instance, part of brain that is related to numbers and color understanding. That way, some numbers might be colored in red, some numbers might be colored in blue, and etc. And in conclusion, I'd like to say that you can do whatever you want. Even if you have aphantasia or you're blind, you can still get most out of life. If there are famous people who have aphantasia, you can no longer use this as an excuse to doing nothing. And thank you.